climate change is happening.
Yeah.
It's happening, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse in a way that depends on what we do.
Right.
And there'll be challenges,
Hmm.
but none of those challenges right now are going to end human civilization.
Right.
They may make it very difficult to live in certain parts of the world,
Hmm.
and they're gonna bring challenges,
Hmm.
and that's why we have to address it.
Dystopia Tonight. Dystopia Tonight.
Well, it's nice to be with you virtually.
Isn't it? I feel like that's just what we've all gotten used to. So
Yeah, that's right. I
yeah,
don't know. It's hard to believe people may actually be three-dimensional. I don't know if that really.
Yeah, I know. I think after all this happened, the first time I was actually with people in person, it was I didn't think I was gonna have a hard time adjusting, but it really was weird to go, okay, eye contact, don't have to look at a ring light.
Yeah,
It was
that's
weird.
right. You don't want to. Yeah, and to shake. Actually, if you actually shake hands, it really feels weird.
It really does. And
Uh,
I made that awkward mistake in the beginning of like not knowing what people wanted to do.
yeah,
And like
yeah,
I just went straight in for the fucking handshake and it was over after that. I was
yeah.
like,
That's right. You could be arrested for that now, I think.
yeah,
Anyway,
exactly. I
actually,
was
where I
like,
live, there's no COVID, so it's just it's really nice
oh,
to although they still now for a lot they're back to masks and stuff,
yeah.
but yeah, there's no COVID. So for the whole summer, it was so weird for me. I got used to not wearing a mask because
Oh,
there were
wow.
zero cases. So
Yeah. Is it like, how is Canada handling the whole thing too? Because I know I don't, if in the US, we're just kind of boned depending on what state you're in.
yeah, well, I mean, it's that way to some extent. It's that way. Canada's had its resurgences, but I happen
Hmm.
to live in a nice little spot with a huge moat around it, and a province with a moat around it, and it's got very few people, so it's ideal. And so actually, it really is ideal because the only way there's a big bridge that gets you in here, and they literally stop everyone at the bridge and make them take a test,
Hmm.
and so it's great if you can have a big moat. It's a wonderful thing to do.
I know you keep saying the moat thing, and I'm like, I got to dig a moat around
Yeah,
my
yeah,
area.
yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I live in a small town in New Jersey, and it's kind of a beach town. So like in the winter, it doesn't matter. There's nothing. It's just dead, and I love it that way
Yeah,
because
that's great here.
yeah.
That's the way it is here. I was just driving my dog to the beach
Hmm.
this afternoon because after October 15th, the national park, which is 10 minutes away from me, is allows dogs on the beach. So we just
Hmm.
went for 10 or 15 minutes, but it was so nice because nobody on the way there, nobody in the. It's just wonderful.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I know. Isn't that? It's weird how like I feel like I'm a basically a social person, but I do really enjoy that time alone. When I find out that anybody's not in the area, I'm like, oh, this is so nice.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's true. Oh, I've always thought I was a social person. Frankly, as I get older, people get kind of more annoying.
Right? I'm so
Yeah,
glad you feel that way too, because I like when my circle's getting smaller and smaller. I'm just
yeah.
like, oh, this is so nice. I don't have to deal with anything. I loved your paper that you had today, your essay that you had basically on climate change, and I haven't gotten a chance to read your book yet, but I've read a lot of things you've written about climate change and that you've talked about it. Is it weird that I find comfort when anybody talks about how much time we have left? Is it weird that I'm like, oh, good, as long as I have a date?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but at the same time, it's really unfortunate and there's so many things that are happening on the left because I'm basically been on the left,
Mhm.
politically much of my life, and
Same.
and it's just so sad for me to see all the nonsense. My piece in the Wall Street Journal today was things about the left,
Right.
but 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 I also get really upset when people on the left start saying we have 12 years left. There's a congresswoman who's from very close to where you live, who's
Right.
very famous in the Democratic Party, and our children are going to die in 12 years,
Right.
and that's just the worst thing you can do because it just detracts from the whole thing and makes everyone say, well, this is just nonsense. And so
Yeah.
just as I have no patience for climate change deniers, I have really little patience for people who decide that not only is doomsday the necessary way to get people's attention, but it has to be doomsday in 12 years, or
Right.
because that's I mean, climate change is happening.
Yeah.
It's happening, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get worse in a way that depends on what we do.
Right.
And there'll be challenges, but
Mhm.
none of those challenges right now are going to end human civilization.
Right.
They may make it very difficult to live in certain parts of the world,
Mhm.
and they're gonna bring challenges.
Mhm.
And that's why we have to address it. We have to address it because, unfortunately, and the only reason there's a rush is not because we're going to die in 12 years,
Right.
because the real impacts of climate change will be gradual over this century, at the fastest, and maybe over a millennium after that.
Mhm.
But the problem is, I think I called in my book the Las Vegas effect. Namely, what goes in the atmosphere stays in the atmosphere, and when it comes to carbon dioxide, anyway. And
Right.
so all this every year, when we dump 10 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere, which is what we do,
Mhm.
5 billion of that stays there. And so if you want to keep the total carbon amount less than a certain level, every year you wait, it becomes more dramatic after that. And that's the only reason that there's some urgency. Because if we'd started 10 years ago, we put 100 billion tons of carbon in the atmosphere. By the way, for this is too technical, but I'll say it anyway. Before human industrial civilization, there was 600 billion tons of carbon in the atmosphere, and in the
Right.
last 10 years alone, we've dumped another 100 billion tons in the atmosphere, and that's why, if we'd started 10 years ago, it would be less demanding and challenging to try and reach those goals. But anyway, we're
Right.
not. You're not going to. Climate change alone is not going to kill you in 12 years. There might be a lot of other things we'll do,
Sure.
and including, global tensions that may result and that sort of thing. If you want to, since we're talking about dystopia,
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah,
climate change.
exactly. And that's the funny thing I think that people don't address sometimes. Whenever I hear people talking about climate change, they talk about one specific thing and not the domino effect that all these little details are going to have on our lives, on the way psychologically we handle shit and
Let me give you
process it.
let me give you an example. Although I've heard people dispute this, so it's not ironclad. But Syria had a huge drought.
Hmm.
Whether it was due to climate change or not, one doesn't know. What did it do? It led people into the cities. That people would leave their farms and go into cities, which
Right.
caused, of course, a lot of uproar and problems, and that led to basically the civil war in Syria, which
Hmm.
led to tons of now immigrants, tons of people trying to get out of the country, and all of that because of a drought. And so there can be these massive geopolitical impacts
Right.
that may be due to climate change or something else.
Yeah.
I was once on a program. Well, I used to do a lot in Australia called Q&A,
Hmm.
and I was always amazed because there were all these conservative members of parliament who at that time they still do, they take boat people from Indonesia who are trying to emigrate illegally, but nevertheless trying to better their lives by landing in Australia, and they put them on this awful island where many of them die. It's just like goes back to the 18th, 19th century.
Right.
Anyway, but these same people, these same politicians were against doing anything about climate change, and I said, well, look, you have what, 500, I don't know how many people, 200 million people in Indonesia nearby, and
Hmm.
when they're low lying, and when the sea level rises and there's no place to live, you look around, where's a big empty place that's close to them? And it's and it's Australia. I said, if you have a problem with a few thousand boat people, try a few hundred million,
Yeah.
but it didn't have any impact.
Yeah, it's weird. It's the same kind of thing where even with COVID, I feel like people did not prep in a way that made any sense. I don't know why the message never gets out there. That's like, you do A because you'll prevent B, C, and D from happening, and then we can curb whatever. They always just focus on scare tactics and what the scariest thing is instead of just explaining it. And as soon as people hear something too frightening, they're like, I'm turning it off. None of it makes any
Exactly.
sense anymore.
There's
Yeah.
nothing I can do. The world is doomed. I'm just
Right.
going to forget about it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So instead, you want to empower people. That's why I wrote my book, which is just the science, to show that anyone can understand the science. And then
Right.
you can think about what's sensible and rational, and maybe vote for people who are sensible and rational if
Mhm.
such people exist.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and,
yeah,
uh,
yeah. It's hard.
and anyway, so that was the reason I didn't talk about any policy in this last book of mine, because that turns people off. I have friends of
Yeah.
mine on both sides of the aisle who basically don't want to be told what to do. And if you start talking policy, they just don't stop listening. But if it's just the
Mhm.
science, then
Yeah.
they can say, okay, well, we know here's the problem, and now we want to do X or Y, and then you can have rational political differences over that. But
Exactly,
anyway.
because I think you're right. I think inherently people want to be part of solving the problem and not necessarily told exactly what needs to be done to solve the problem. Because how many times have we been, accessory to someone else's agenda, no matter what the thing
Exactly.
is?
And the minute that happens, when you think you're part of someone else's agenda, then you just stop listening. Then it
Yep.
colors the facts. They go in one ear and out the other. I mean, suddenly you say, okay, this person is an X,
Hmm.
liberal, conservative, you whatever you want, and therefore I'm not going to listen to them, or therefore what they have to say isn't important or
Right.
even relevant. And
Yeah.
that's really unfortunate. Of course, it's a property of our times. It's really, really. On my own podcast, I try and have conversations with people with whom I may differ. It's
Yes,
strange as it
I
may seem,
agree.
and it's nice to have such without yelling and in
Hmm.
into. I
Well,
guess
because
I could
people
say
still
this. Do you
don't.
remember without turning into Dan Aykroyd on Saturday Night Live? Do you remember? I know what he used to say to Jane Curtin, but I
Oh
won't
yeah, of
say
course.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And the thing is like I still don't understand the idea or where it even came from that you have to legitimately hate somebody because you disagree with one or two things they've. I don't understand it. I have friends who subscribe to that kind of behavior, and it drives me absolutely insane because I
Well,
feel like it's how you crush ideas.
yeah, well, and that's what I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal today, and that's what it was all about.
Hmm.
In universities, which should be the last place where you
Right.
try and crush ideas,
Right.
and when and it began, with MIT basically doing just that. We don't like you. Here's a professor who's going to talk about climate.
Right.
It turns out climate change and astrobiology, but we don't like what you said in Newsweek. So, for the
Right.
safety of our students, even though you're not talking about that at all, we're canceling your lecture. And universities have become these places because of this thing called DEI, which really should be called DIE,
Mm.
um, and it's policed. So there's nothing you can say or do that isn't. If you disagree with
Yeah.
the groupthink, then you're not even allowed to speak, or you're not even allowed to be hired.
Right.
And that's the worst thing. I mean, as an academic, as someone who's taught at universities for 40 years, it's so disappointing to me to see them become places where you can't express your views,
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's exactly what university is all about. And they
And
shouldn't be comfortable. It's education's supposed to be uncomfortable.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And the
Yeah.
thing is that those are the places where you should learn about the duality of human nature and not to be, fucking spearheading it in a direction
Yeah.
where it's just like, no, it's 100% purity. And plus, I always felt like, especially in a university or whatever it is, the good ideas always wound up kicking the shit out of the bad ones in the end of the day. You know what
Well,
I mean?
that's what
Like,
happens. That's the
yeah,
way it works. That's the wonderful thing about free speech is eventually you defend your ideas and you have discussions and the good
right.
ideas. And that's how science works. That's how all intellectual activity is supposed to work. But somehow you have to shield people because
Uh,
somehow words are going to damage them forever. And I think I wrote a piece once, but I'm old enough. I remember what they said in the schoolyard. What I used to say: "Sticks and stones will break my
oh
bones, but
yeah.
words will never hurt me, and or names will never hurt me." And I think sure but the notion that you're never supposed to be uncomfortable or even hurt
Hmm.
is just
Oh
so
yeah.
ridiculous, because that life is full of times of being uncomfortable and hurt, and learning how to deal with that is part of being what we call a grown up.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway.
Man, I remember talking to my friends even when I was younger, when I was in like high school, and I'd always say the same thing. Like, you have every right to be comfortable in your own home. The minute you step outside that door, it's a whole fucking playground of, just shit you're gonna take in that's gonna be uncomfortable, weird. Like, if there was stuff if I stayed uncomfortable, like I always think about this, and I think if there's a term for it or whatever it is, but basically, like, when I was growing up or whatever, there were life experiences I had when I was younger that I was, I mean, my dad had not been the greatest dad, basically, right? And like dealt some drugs, yada yada yada. But
Okay.
like, and it was always at like a party situation, right? So when I was a kid, parties equaled bad for me because I
Okay.
would get like a weird vibe, you know what I mean? But when I grow up, I was like, I would go to parties and I'd feel weird. But
Hmm.
I had to process that shit and then go,
Sure.
okay, look, either I'm going to be the loser who doesn't get to have fun when all my friends are having fun, or I'm going to get over this and I'm going to fucking have some fun. And I did the other thing. And I feel like no one does that anymore. They all walk around with the I'm okay, you're okay buttons.
Yeah, like once you're hurt, it's impossible. You're damaged for life.
Right.
But
Oh,
I
yeah.
keep going back to something you said, which has been distracting me. You said you're allowed to be comfortable in your own home. I thought, geez, who's comfortable in their own home?
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's yeah.
I grew
That's
up. I
great.
remember growing up. I didn't feel comfortable. But anyway, then
Yeah. Well, now look at you. You're bragging about your lake and the kayaks beforehand.
yeah,
Come on.
yeah, I know. But that's
How
right.
good are we? How so going back to your thing though. How do you think that humans will, eventually come up with something? Because I keep seeing in the news every now and again, maybe on Unilat or whatever it is, somebody's working on a weather machine. Some weird things like that. Where literally I saw one where they, I don't know if it was they were having a drought somewhere, whatever it was, and they literally just shot stuff into the air, and it was this giant machine, right? I
Yeah,
don't know if it's
cloud
it's
seeding
crazy.
clouds. He's trying
Yes,
to see clouds. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
How but do you think there's like it'll force us almost in the same way, like let's say COVID sped up the
Mm.
vaccine? You know what I mean?
Well,
Like we
look,
had a
I mean, I think,
pandemic.
look, if you're talking about what's called geoengineering, which is
Yeah.
the name that it has now,
Mhm.
I suspect that that's inevitable, and it used to scare me, because it turns out if we shoot aerosols into the upper atmosphere, they'll reflect sunlight and reduce the amount of heat coming into the earth, and they basically can counter the additional heat that's coming in due to climate change, due to CO2 absorption.
Right.
And so, but the problem is, and the reason I used to argue against it strongly is that, well, it may do something else too, and we
Yeah.
don't know, and it's complicated. Moreover, the problem also, or some people may call it the advantage, when you're dealing with carbon dioxide, it's a global issue, and all countries have to contribute. But to do this, one country just can decide, like the Soviet Union or the United States or Russia or the United States,
Mhm.
saying we want to do this, and boom, and shoot it up there, and it affects the whole globe.
Right.
But the reason it isn't as worrisome to me as it was before, and I think it is inevitable that it'll be tried, is that unlike carbon dioxide, these aerosols have a half life of about a year in the atmosphere.
Oh.
So if they screw things up, it's not going to. I mean, we'll learn about it relatively quickly and say, okay, we shouldn't
Right.
do it again. But that's one possible solution, and I
Mhm.
suspect if things get problematic enough that we may be driven to that, because a lot easier, frankly. Look, it's a lot easier to do that than reduce carbon emission,
Mhm.
and that's one of the other reasons people have been against geoengineering. Is it makes it? It seems like once you do that, you say, well, we don't have to worry about carbon anymore, and that's not
Right.
the case. So people don't want to give people an out, really, but I think it's probably going to happen.
How honest do you think scientists are about their? Because I see, like, I've seen you speak on these news programs before too, and like Neil
Mm.
deGrasse Tyson and all those guys. You know, um, is it frustrating for you? Do you feel confined when you're doing a news show that you're not getting maybe everything you need to get across in this short amount? You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah, well,
hard to
TV
talk
is
to the
for
public.
yeah, sure. You have to learn how to do 30-second sound bites. It is. I mean, radio or internet is one thing, but TV certainly. I've had a long history of doing these things on TV,
Yeah.
and it is frustrating because it's a 2 minute. At best, it's maybe a 2 to 3 minute interview on TV. So I mean, it's
Hmm.
every now and then, depending on the subject, it's longer,
Right.
and that's hard to get anything substantial across. Moreover, I've done so many morning shows where there's usually a man and a woman as the guest,
Sure.
as the host,
Yeah, I've done
and
them too. Yeah.
and beforehand, well, first of all, most of the time they're looking in to see how they look, but before, but then they're terrified because it's science. So I
Yeah.
always have to say, I remember I always have to sort of pat them and say, "Don't worry, it'll be over soon." you know,
That's
I'm the
great.
one that's supposed to be nervous, but they're very nervous, and so
Yeah.
and that comes across, I think. So it is problematic, but nevertheless, I think it's worth trying because so many people watch
Sure.
TV, and once if you can have fun, um,
Mhm.
then it's a lot of fun. I mean, this was an interview, but I remember it was actually 8 minutes long. It was supposed to be 6 minutes, but he didn't listen to his producer. But I did the Colbert Report with Stephen
Oh,
Colbert, and
love.
and that and,
Yeah.
and that was. But once you start having fun back and forth, it's people relax. But he was great. So
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's
yeah,
he's so
yeah,
quick. Yeah, I mean, because I try to feel like as somebody who like kind of reads about this stuff all the time too. It's again, even with the COVID stuff, I feel like my God, I feel like there's no good way to get out information anymore. I mean, like you've got your podcast and stuff too, and everybody's trying different mediums and stuff like that. But it's like I always feel like slightly bad for the scientists, just the frustration that you guys must feel. Where you're like, we know What's
Well, we don't
happening?
always know. Well, we don't always know, and that's the important thing. I mean, that's the thing that also is frustrating, and it's really important if you're a scientist who tends to speak to the public or
Mhm.
speak to reporters.
Yeah.
Reporters want definitive answers,
Yeah.
and they'll always say, "So this is this," and you'll say, "Well, we think there's a high likelihood." No, we don't want to hear high likelihood. We don't want to. We want to hear that you know. And if you're being interviewed, there's a
Mhm.
real pressure to try and please the person who's interviewing you.
Yeah.
And so a lot of scientists get trapped by that and say
Right.
things beyond the domain of validity because they're really responding to someone who wants
Mhm.
certainty. And science rarely provides certainty. It provides strong indications or suggestions which are meant to be tested. And
Yeah.
so that is a real problem. That the other big problem is journalists in general are taught that there's two sides to every story, right?
Ugh.
So I
Yeah.
mean, I used to defend evolution on TV and other
Right.
places, and they always, their feeling is they got to find someone who is a creationist, right, to put
Mhm.
on their side. But I used to say that gives the wrong impression
Mhm.
because if you want to have the right impression, on this table there'd be 10,000 scientists on one side, and then there's crackpot on the other, and 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 the point is with science, one side is just often wrong,
Right.
and so it giving the sense that it's he said, she said, or that we have to have these debates is unfortunate. Of course, at the forefront of science,
Mhm.
there's lots of debates because we really don't know what we're doing. But when it comes to well-established science, we don't have to have a debate about whether the Earth is flat. Although we do if you're an NBA basketball player, I guess. But
Oh my God.
but
Yeah.
I know, but we shouldn't have to.
Right.
That's settled science, and so. But journalists really like to always have a contrary person on because they feel it somehow gives balance. But it's really gives the public a misimpression, especially if the
Mhm.
contrary person is very well spoken, which they
Yeah.
usually are, and all the rest.
Yeah, they seem to be getting better at that kind of a thing, and it always kind of worries me because it's like, the Democrats seem to do a lot of this shit too, where they think somebody's gone or defeated. You know what I mean? They're like,
Yeah,
we took care of that guy with a
yeah,
tweet,
like
and I'm like,
Trump.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I don't think you really did though. Like, there's no definitive way to do it because they just learned to be better. Or the next guy,
Yeah,
like, look at I mean, they basically, you know, trashed Fox News for God knows how long, right? And that was
yeah,
like the worst thing out there. And now there's Newsmax,
yeah.
and those
Those news,
guys, yeah, and those
OBN
guys
or
seem to
whatever
do
it's
it
called.
really better.
Yeah. And I understand Trump's making something that's even worse now. I just read in the news.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Yeah, some kind
So,
of
but
Trump
but
book.
one wonders. But the interesting thing is, it's amusing to me because it'll become a competitor for Fox and
Yeah,
all those others. And so, it'll be interesting.
yeah,
Anyway,
it'll be nice to see if they wind
I
up all
guess,
eating themselves.
yeah. I don't think it'll be interesting. Actually, I think it'll be depressing. But we'll
Yeah.
see.
No, I know. Just one more thing to add to the list.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it frustrating for you during COVID and stuff like that with the amount of misinformation that was put out there? Like, do you guys feel, just between all these social media platforms and all the wrong stuff getting out,
It
like
is very well. The yes, but at the same time, I think I wrote pieces on this.
hmm
Um, the public wants answers and expects scientists to know
right.
what's going to happen with COVID. Is this vaccine going to work? And the whole point of science is that you don't know in advance. And
Yeah.
so I was very frustrated in the sense that people were looking for definitive answers. How many people are going to die? What do we do? How effective are masks going to be? And the answer is we don't know until we test it.
Yeah.
So and that doesn't play well on TV. So that was frustrating to me that the whole point of science is to test things and find out the answers and to expect scientists to know about even the causes of how the mechanism of COVID was remarkable. Now, the fact that it was almost superhuman that people figured this out in a matter of days or weeks, when normally takes months or years. But
Right.
even then, to know, you don't know how these things are until you test them on a large population in one
Sure.
way or another. And so that was the most frustrating part to me, I think. But on the other hand, I loved it in the sense of of I remember when first I didn't love it, but I
No, I know
remember
what you
going
mean.
around my town and it was like empty and there were no
Yes.
traffic. And I thought, wow, it's just like it's so much more pleasant in that sense. But
I'm
but
glad you said it because I feel the same way. I keep my friends and I quietly, sometimes keep talking about how Like in the beginning of COVID, I was like, man, I felt like a sense of relief. I was sleeping better.
Yeah.
There was nobody was around. It was basically like The Walking Dead. There was just all the streets and highways were empty.
Yeah, especially in New Jersey. I mean, the point is that where if you're in a place with a lot of traffic, boy, it was nice to. But also for me, actually, what it did do was it produced a time I almost never had before, where all I was supposed to do 4 events in Europe and in Asia and
Mhm.
and travel elsewhere around Canada, I think, and England, and all of every trip got, of course, canceled right away. So I'm
Mhm.
not traveling, which I used to do a lot,
Yeah.
and I don't have anything else to do. So it was really wonderful
Mm.
because I did something I'd never done before. I mean, I wrote my last book, The Physics of
Nice.
Climate Change, which I wrote. I've never written a book without having a contract in advance, but I just said, look, I can't be a first responder. I
Right.
can't. What can I do that's useful for people?
Nice.
So I did two things. I record every day a 5-minute physics video as well, and
Mhm.
explaining something in physics. Because I thought, okay, well, I can do that, and people like that. And then I
Right.
thought I'll write this book, and I wrote. No, the shortest it's ever taken me to write a book is a little under a year,
Wow.
and I wrote this last book in 10 weeks because
Wow.
there were
Right.
for the first time in my life no distractions. I mean, I could work 18 hours a day, and it still amazes me that I was able to do it. So in
Yeah.
that sense, it was nice, I suppose.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It kind of slowed everything down and put stuff into perspective too. Like they were just, with all my dates and stuff being canceled for touring and it just kept going on and on and on. I was like, well, I started to exercise muscles I hadn't before. We started to do Zoom shows and then,
Yeah,
putting this started during the pandemic and I started interviewing people I really liked and respected and that took off and then it just slowed everything down to a
and
nice.
my wife and I discovered we could live together, and it was okay.
I had just gotten out of probably bad timing. I just left a relationship right when it started, and I was like, "Can we rekindle that or get into like a core group or something?" Uh,
Yeah, yeah. No, but because I usually travel a lot, and I wonder what well, we drive each other crazy, and
yeah,
it was really nice to find out it was actually pleasant to be home.
right. Oh
My
yeah.
dog loved it as well. So anyway,
Oh man. Oh, my cat, the same thing, man. It was so. At first, he was kind of like, "You're here a lot," and then he was like, immediately got used to it and would not leave me alone. I was like,
yeah,
"Oh my
I
god, this
hate
is."
leaving my animals now when I'm
Yeah.
going away. I have to go on a trip in a few weeks for the first time in a while, and I
Oh,
hate it. I hate it.
are you going?
Anyway,
Is it a vacation trip or is it like a business trip?
no, it's to record. It's to do a few things. I'm recording a few podcasts in our
Nice.
studio in Phoenix,
Oh,
where I haven't
sweet.
been back to since early summer,
Wow.
and I'm also going actually to Las Vegas just to do a show with my friend Penn Jillette, and
Oh, I love Pendulum. Oh my
yeah.
god, he's so great. Wait a minute, when are you going to Vegas? Because I'm going to be there January 29th. I've got a
No, I'm
gig.
just going in a few weeks.
Damn it. Oh,
Sorry,
I was going to
sorry.
say that would have been fun.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to say so like because I Richard Dawkins just really got into like a kind of a thing on Twitter recently
Oh,
for
he
kind of
always gets. I don't know his most recent one, but he often
yeah,
gets
yeah,
on
yeah.
these things.
He does, which I think is kind of frustrating because sometimes I'm just like especially on my, our side of the aisle, the left or whatever. But I'm just like, could we just let scientists be scientists and just speak plainly? Like it's their job to just think factually about a thing and logically about a thing. And it may not always be sensitive, but you need to shut the fuck up so they can get to their point. Like it drives me insane. Like,
It
do
drives
you,
me insane too. But it's not just scientists. Everyone should be allowed
oh, I
to.
know. Comic
But
shit
you're
is
right.
always
And
better.
Richard, speaks his mind
Mhm.
and plainly. And of course, if you ever do that, you'll offend people. And
Right. I think it's,
that's a good thing, actually.
yeah, exactly. I think it's kind of swinging back the other way now, though,
It's not. I
thankfully.
mean, he's not Dave Chappelle, but he's
Oh, I
okay.
know, dude. That thing is so unbelievably fun. You know what? I have no patience for people who start a sentence with, "I didn't watch the special," but and I'm like, then fuck off. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm like a lot of people. I watched it. I mean, I would have probably
I
watched it
watched it too.
eventually anyway, but I made a point of watching it when I heard about it,
Yep.
and then I thought,
Yeah.
what's the big deal? I
It
mean, I
was
just
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
what's
It
the
was. He's,
deal?
he's
It's
brilliant.
just so ridiculous.
Yeah. And
You
none
know,
of the.
and for example, and I'll be even a little serious. I haven't talked about. Well, I'll talk about this in public, but
Sure.
um, you know, so my background's Jewish, right? And there
Right.
are a bunch of jokes that make fun of basically Israel, right?
Yep.
But I'm not traumatized or think,
No.
my God, he's going to bring about anger and violence against Jews because he
Right.
made a joke.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's insane to me that we went from years ago, where the right was the group who was trying to assign some kind of correlation between lyrics and action, or
Yeah,
video games and violence, or movies. Like how many times was Tarantino back in the day in the news all
yeah,
the time for saying that he was causing all this shit? And
yeah.
then for some reason, the left started to adapt it, and they're the one. I always say I just say I'm politically socialist and comedically conservative, because whatever whatever side lets me joke about whatever the fuck I want to joke about.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's, I mean, I talked, I did a long podcast with my friend, the comedian Ricky Gervais,
Oh, I
and
love Ricky.
and we had, and we point out, I mean, it's ridiculous. You're not the things you're not allowed to say, but but I remember you said he was working out, which was a surprise. And on a stairmaster at a hotel, and he's looking, and someone's getting shot in the eye, and he said, give me a break. I mean, that's okay,
Yeah.
but I'd rather have see a breast on TV than than, than have to
I
see
was
that. So it's amazing. It really is that we don't, and I don't believe in policing more or less any of it,
no.
but that we don't make a big deal about the violence that but we somehow say the language is going to impact people in an
Right.
awful way. If seeing these horrible things doesn't, but hearing a word you don't like is somehow going to traumatize you forever.
Right. For some reason, it became easier to attack people who did stuff like that, because I think when at a certain point, when they couldn't get the politicians, and then obviously Trump got in office, they
Yeah.
went after incredibly low hanging fruit,
Well, I
and
think
it
people
was
were frustrated. They were
yeah.
very frustrated. Trump, here's a guy who's clearly really should be canceled, who's
Hmm.
clearly guilty of every bad thing you say about him,
Right.
and but he's impervious to it all. And so that I think I really do, and I'm not the first one to say this, that a lot of the crap that's gone on since then is people feeling, well, I can't get him, I got to get somebody,
Yes,
that kind of thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the way it's been. And the funny thing is that it's not even canceled. Like if they get Trump, it's literally just going to be it's an indictment. It's the
Yeah.
law. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Well,
half of it.
I'm still hoping for the um,
Steve
Al
Bannon.
Capone
Oh,
Al to reoccur, right? I mean, Trump.
yeah.
I'm hoping that you won't get Trump for all the clear legal things he's done and awful things, but maybe you'll get him for tax evasion like they did Al Capone.
Right. Did you know any of the guys in the like? I don't know how well or close the community is, but did you know any guys who were in his basically science division, kind of aiding him, who were like, was that? I can't. I want to almost be a fly on the wall in that room when they're trying
Well,
to explain
he
shit.
disbanded most of it. He didn't.
Right.
I mean, he did eventually have a science advisor,
He did.
and
Yeah.
and I don't know if I knew that guy. I knew the science
Okay.
advisors to to both Bushes,
Hmm.
and as well as after that. In fact, I was, in full disclosure, I was during the campaign. I was one of a group of science advisors for Obama in 2008. But
Oh wow.
but no, I think he didn't. I mean, those people. Friends of mine who've been the presidential science advisor have told me early on that if you're not if you're not appointed in the bureaucracy early, you become irrelevant. And
Mm,
so it took a long time. If one of these people is put in really late, by then all the political machinations have taken place, and all the people, all the good offices, and all the other things,
right.
and so it was a long, long time before anyone stupid enough to be a science advisor agreed to do it. And by then, I'm sure he was completely marginalized. Yeah.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Is there any way, like, I know that I've seen you guys all kind of collectively talk about scientists and politics and whether or not it's a good thing to get involved. Do you really think, like, do you ever see yourself or anybody else that maybe kind of dabbling in that field?
Oh,
Do you think it hinders scientific, research if
well,
you're involved
it
in
obviously
politics?
hinders the research, but I'm very political, and I have been my whole life. And
Hmm.
there are various times in my life when I did think of running.
Yeah.
Back when I might have, well, I don't think I would have ever had a chance, but
Mm,
but um, I seriously thought about running actually against John McCain when I was in Arizona,
nice.
because at that time there was no Democratic candidate.
Right.
No one
Yeah.
wanted to run against him, and I thought, well, shit, I can run. I can run, and of course I'm going to lose. But what a chance to be able to speak. Have because it become a nationally known race, and you could speak. You could tell the truth. What a
Right.
strange thing that would be. And so I thought about it, but then it's so constraining. If you're a politician, you can't say what you think, and you can't.
Right.
And I thought about this a long time ago, that I could probably I was fortunate at the time to have a fair soapbox that maybe that I could do more by speaking out and critiquing
Yeah.
than I could. In fact, not again. I'm not sure I would have even been asked, but I remember during the campaign there were a group of us who were advising Obama,
Hmm.
and then a number of members of that group became significant players in the Obama administration from uh, Secretary of Energy and head of the White House science advisor to the president. But I was really happy that I didn't even consider that, because I could that gave me the freedom to criticize Obama if I wanted
Yeah.
to later. Yeah.
Of
Anyway.
course, yeah. Which is an odd thing to do. I feel like this. I always think the same thing. Like, I really would love to see a scientist in a powerful position, somebody that you can just trust to do the logical things that need to be done. But at the same time, I'm like, how swept up would they be in the machine in order
Well,
to,
and look, and let's face it. I mean, a politician, it's a job. Look, we shouldn't be naive. The job of a politician is very different than that of a scientist. The job of a politician
Mhm.
is to help convince people, help bring people along, and help, in principle, allow disparate groups to get together and make things happen. But
Right.
certainly, and all of those tools and techniques are not necessarily ones that a scientist would have over anyone else,
Hmm.
and so it's not clear that a scientist, even a good scientist, would be a good politician, or I mean,
Sure.
lead to, you know, for example, I knew both of Obama's secretaries of energy, and um, and the first one, Steve Chu, is a friend of mine, Nobel Prize winning physicist,
Hmm.
one of the brightest people I've ever known, one of the most astute political academics I've ever known.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, when he goes to Washington, it's going to make such impact. And then I watched him be basically completely stymied as Secretary of Energy,
Right.
and it surprised me, because I thought, well, here's a guy who knows how to maneuver in and he couldn't. So I think it takes being a leader is a different thing, and a politician, for better or worse, is a leader. Although what they actually do is follow. They try and find out what people want and then do that.
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, there should be scientists, and there's two, maybe only one now. There used to be two physicists in Congress. There's one now from Chicago, or from outside Chicago, who I know, Bill Foster, is a
Hmm.
PhD physicist. I'm not sure there's any other PhD scientists in Congress right now,
Hmm.
and that is unfortunate, because the God knows there's still enough lawyers, and
Yeah, I would. That's
uh,
the thing that used to drive me crazy. I'd be like, "Wow, how come a lawyer can immediately switch over to politics and not any other field? Like, you don't
well,
see it that
because
often."
I guess I shouldn't say anything, but I will.
We love that here.
Yeah. But because lawyers, they learn how to defend a point, whether
Yeah,
regardless of whether they believe it or not.
right.
They're very
Exactly.
good at it. I mean, and that's useful part of the legal system. Don't get me wrong, but it
Hmm.
it makes it helps, I think, in that training. Anyway.
It's kind of funny. I've seen, like, I always feel bad when some guys go on these, podcasts or whatever, and they'll be with a comic. You know what I mean? And I've never heard of the scientist before, whatever it is, and you
Yeah.
can tell they're not good at communicating the
Yeah.
knowledge they know. And it doesn't matter how dumb the comic is on the other end of the screen. Comedians are used to speaking, so it just frustrates the shit out of me. Where I'm like, oh, I know this scientist knows exactly what they're trying to say, but they can't get a word in. And it was a lot of that was going on during the COVID thing too, where they'd have somebody else to balance it out, but they just wind up beating them over the head with pillows.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I mean, when I wrote this piece today about that appeared today about the ridiculous diversity statements that are being required at universities, and
Sure.
that to have someone who's doing string theory or theoretical astrophysicists have to write a long statement about how they'll how all their experience with diversity and how they're going to enforce it when they become a professor is just ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Because they know nothing. But I used to say the same thing. For a long time, um, the buzzword then years ago was, and this when I was chair of a department, I'd see junior faculty come in order to get these grants, they'd have to have outreach proposals, how they're going to outreach and reach them out. These people have been working, in a lab or in an office for nonstop 20 hours a day to get their PhD done, and many of them don't have any interest in that, but
Yeah, exactly.
they'd have to pretend. And what I used to say is that no, young scientists who are talented should be doing science. There's some young scientists who are interested in communicating, and they should be encouraged to do that.
Right.
But not all scientists, and as I used to say, most importantly, not only should not all scientists communicate, but most of my colleagues I want to keep away from the public.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. You don't want them to get tainted. What do you guys?
No, it's not that they'll be tainted. I don't. I think the impression,
Right.
it's the other way around. The impression the public will get, it'd be
Yeah,
awful.
I get you. Yeah, that makes more sense. Do you guys kind of dabble in any of this stuff where, like, I mean, I've been, people joke around about it, and some people are dead on serious about it. But about how in 2012, when the Hadron Collider, they were messing around with that, they basically said that ever since then, we've had one horrific thing happen, after the other. I love playing with that kind of stuff because I know it's not likely, but it is so much fun.
Yeah, that's good. I haven't heard that, but
yeah,
it was supposed to destroy the world, but I guess it was going to do it much more quickly than it has been. I suppose.
Literally, some people are like, I think either some of the theories are it has destroyed the world, and we're being slowly sucked into a black hole, and it's kind of shifting everything apart, and that's why
if it were going to destroy the world, it would happen so fast we wouldn't know it. So that's the good part. Like that.
See, that's oddly
no,
enough.
if we were going to do that, yeah, exactly. I mean, if we were going to do that, it
me.
would hit you before you knew it happened. So at the speed of light. So and it didn't, as far as I can tell. We're still around.
Do you guys have some kind of early, because if I was a scientist, this is what I would do. Do you guys have some kind of early warning network that you guys are all on, where, like, if something bad's going to happen, all the scientists are going to know before the regular people?
Oh, I think if something really bad going to happen, none of us would have any advance warning.
Oh, okay.
No, really, yeah, it'd just be gone unless we're. And it may have already happened. Maybe we're all in hell. I don't know, but yeah.
I just like.
But I will tell you, you talked about Richard Dawkins. I don't think he did this in a tweet, but it's in his book because he talked about the Large Hadron Collider, but then he points out that the editors that they made a typo. It became the Large Hadron Collider, and
oh, that's fantastic.
Anyway,
oh, that's great. Yeah, I feel like I just like the idea that, like, how, like, when a bad storm is coming, all the animals kind of rush into one direction, they flee the area. I'm not kidding. Like, I feel like if a meteor is gonna, something's gonna happen, and I see all the scientists I know kind of chilling out, and I'm just like, where the fuck are they going?
Well, but that's a good thing. And one of my editors, a long time ago, for the I think one woman who edited the physics of Star Trek, then when I wrote that,
love that,
said, people poo-poo science. They let's say Trump or all those other people. But, when the aliens come or when there's a big disaster, who's everyone going to turn to right away?
Exactly.
And it's just like the day the earth stood still, what's going to happen? And it's true. And I used to make a joke about it when I criticized George W. Bush's administration, which really was the precursor for ignoring science. And they were awful at that. But I used to joke about the fact that here's George W. Bush saying, well, when we teach evolution, we should teach intelligent design because we don't know what, both sides equal. But then the avian flu came up and he gets on the TV and he says, we have to figure out how fast this is mutating and evolving, And I'm thinking, sure, when there's a disaster, immediately you buy the science because, that's the way. I mean, when COVID, right? I mean, you didn't see people saying, well, let's pray. I mean,
exactly.
But or let's look at the sky for signs.
Although, to be fair, some of them were like, the guy at the deli said this isn't anything to worry about. So
yeah, well, that's true. I mean, yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that, but I mean, but the point is, when it comes to those kind of things, people suddenly give up their skepticism of science, and well, they used to, but who would have? I would never have imagined that this miracle of the vaccines are developed, and I would have thought people would be flocking, and some people were, but the skepticism, I mean, it just still blows my mind.
Oh yeah, it blows my mind too. I don't understand it. I don't even understand when people say, I don't understand people not being able to weigh the options either. Like, even if you're like, look, we don't know what the vaccine's going to do to us, which whatever, but you do know what COVID does to you, so you do have to weigh those options.
Well, the people are not good at risk analysis. There's a lot of studies about that. People aren't good. They don't want to do this, but then they'll get in their car, which is a lot more dangerous. But same. I mean, so let's say this vaccine, 1 out of every 10 million people has this side effect.
Mm-hmm.
But but 0.5% of the people who were getting COVID, were dying, and
Right.
one in 10 million, so, but when you hear that, it's like people just don't rationalize what risk really is. And I
Right.
used to sound very, very non-sympathetic, I guess. I used to be frustrated. I remember I was frustrated when that idiot was on a plane and tried to light his shoes,
Oh yeah.
and then we all had to take our shoes off, right?
Right.
And I'm thinking, and 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 I just made the point. Not that I want to advocate this, make it clear to your listeners,
Sure.
but
Sure.
look. So if that plane had gone down, and if there were 10 planes that went down every year because of not requiring people to have their shoes taken off,
Right.
then there's something like, what, 200 million people or 400 million people a year fly, okay, and so
Right.
be 300 people, 1,000 people die. You'd still have a 1 in 20 million chance of having an accident,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't have to go through all this rigmarole at the airports.
Right.
But it's but I understand that if people are aware of a potentially lethal thing, they'll
Hmm.
go out of their way. If it's in their face, they'll go out
Yeah.
of their way to avoid it. If it's not in their face, if take coal, right? I mean, more people die every year because of coal than
Sure.
certainly nuclear disasters, because
Right.
of cancer. But it's not in your face,
Yeah.
and so it's much more dangerous to have coal fired power plants than it is to take a COVID vaccine.
Right.
But you'll find with almost 100% accuracy that the people in favor of burning coal are also against vaccines.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think it would be better if people communicated more the idea that, because I feel like this is not something that is mentioned a whole lot, but long COVID and the fact that it's got a more cognitive response to, people are having memory issues.
Yeah.
One of my friends is still suffering from long COVID, and he was expressing like he couldn't, handle basic controllers and stuff like that. And there was normal function stuff that he was
Huh.
doing. He noticed little ticks that were, messing him up. I don't
Huh.
think people talk about long COVID that much, and I think
No,
that's
no.
the greater concern.
Yeah. No, I had COVID. And
You
what did you
did.
just say? What did you just say? No, just joking. But I did have. There was a joke. I mean, it was the last part was a joke. But yeah,
Right.
no, I had COVID in last November, a year ago.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, does that bother do people do you think that if people talked about that, because I don't know how, you know, um I don't know how much that people are aware that that's a thing. That even if you get it, the potential that your body may not handle it well enough and that it may last longer. You know what I mean? Like it may
Yeah.
affect you that way. I don't
Yeah.
know. 'Cause that
Well, I don't
freaks
know
me
either.
out.
I mean,
I don't
well, I look, all these uncertainties freak people out, but I think uh, the bottom line is, you can try and protect yourself against it, and
yeah.
also, and also the long COVID thing is of concern, but one has to realize that most people
Mhm.
don't have those issues, and so
Right.
fixating on the unlikely possibility is what people do, because people are afraid of everything
Yeah.
nowadays.
Well, I mean,
But
in juxtaposition with the vaccine where there's no, so far, how many 6 billion people have taken it, and there's no, you know what I mean? If you're weighing the
yeah.
options, I feel like that helps.
Yeah, and people ask me, when I got because when I got COVID, it was, I didn't know, most people didn't know people had COVID, and
Right.
I told people that, they said, what happened is, and I said, well, I can't play the piano anymore, I can't play the piano,
Right.
and they'd say, what? I said, well, I couldn't play before either, but
That's great.
anyway.
Yeah. You touched on the alien thing before, so I gotta pick your brain
So
about this a little bit too.
okay,
Do you, when you see that stuff that, because obviously that blew up, the Tic Tac thing, the whole, flying around, whatever.
yeah.
Do you guys just gonna have a ball with that kind of shit too, where you're like, we're never gonna, it's ridiculous, or do you actually kind of buy into it a little bit?
Well, no, I don't buy. I mean, I've written about it, and of course, I get hate mail
Sure.
because of it.
Right.
Um,
People want
uh,
you to say that they're here,
yeah,
they
yeah,
visited
and
and
they're not here, and they're not here, and they not haven't been here, and they're
right.
not coming,
I don't know,
and
the guy
so
on Ancient History on the
yeah, I
History
know.
Channel.
Well,
Yeah,
I think that's right. The whole ancient history channel, the
yeah.
whole history channel
I got to get my hair
is
to look
UFO.
like his so people think I
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
I'm talking about.
That whole channel is. I used to do history channel shows, and now it's all just
Oh, I
alien.
know. It's all
But
conspiracy. It's Hitler and aliens. That's the only thing they
yeah.
love.
So two things: Hitler and aliens. Isn't there a movie by that title? But anyway, um,
Probably.
it probably is.
If there isn't, we should
But
do
no,
one.
but it's frustrating because people want to believe, as
Yes.
Fox Mulder did, and I understand. I'd love it, to I mean, it's. I hope that we're not alone in the universe, but I also recognize the likelihood about that we'll ever know that
Right.
is almost zero. And so, as I tried to actually in my book, the I guess the physics of Star Trek, or what I wrote afterwards called Beyond Star Trek, I
Mhm.
basically pointed out that if you try and think of all of the that all of the how actually unlikely it is, given the laws of physics, for this to be happening,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
the most ridiculous possible alternative explanation is more likely than the likelihood that it's aliens. Anything you
Mhm.
see, the likelihood that it's people coming from another star system to kidnap you and do weird kinky experiments on you is so small that and Richard Feynman, the famous physicist who's a hero of mine,
Mhm.
said it's the UFOs are much more likely due to the known irrationality of humans rather than the unknown rationality of aliens.
Right. That makes you'll love this. So I don't know if you saw this in the news the other day, but Demi
Probably.
Lovato
Mm-hmm.
had said that using the term aliens for when they arrive is a derogatory
Sure, of
word.
course. Oh yeah.
You're already sighing. I love it.
We're already,
Yeah,
yeah, no, I'm surprised. We're already
we're already
worried about the
picking
aliens. I mean, we're really the aliens. The poor aliens should not be. They should have equal rights and equal.
when
We
they
should have
get
equal
here.
number of aliens in all physics departments. I mean, we
Yes.
should, because no, I can.
Don't call them the wrong name when they're sifting through your hole when they get here. You know what I mean? You don't
Yeah,
want to do
exactly.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the problem is that it gives illegal aliens a bad name, I guess, but maybe not because aliens are anyway.
There's a couple things though, like they were talking about some legitimate things. Like I mean, a recent paper that I read that just came out about black holes, and actually like basically they do think that there's they create another galaxy, or do they create another, like if you go in,
Universe.
yeah,
That
another
you go through.
universe, that they actually does
Yeah,
come out the other
no.
side. And the other thing was the gamma ray bursts, I guess, are not those signals. I mean, I don't think they're but like that stuff interests me.
Well, that's
Like,
interesting because the gamma ray bursts are emitting more energy
right.
than you could imagine. Than the sun in a second, billions of times more energy is being released than the sun is going to release in its entire lifetime.
Sure.
So that power from that, you can only imagine. The only way physically we know that can come out is to have a supermassive billion mass solar mass black holes eating things, and then the energies work out. Um,
Right. Do
and
they
but most galaxies have supermassive black holes in our we're kind of fortunate, and maybe one of the reasons there's life in our galaxy, I don't know, is that the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy is only a few million solar masses, not a few billion solar masses.
right.
And that may, who knows, that may be really vitally important, that maybe you can have life in galaxies that have such supermassive black holes, billion solar mass black holes, because of the radiation that's ultimately emitted might basically vaporize or destroy life in any part of the galaxy.
Do you have any interest in going to space?
Um, I used to say that in my first marriage, I thought about it a lot, but no, yeah. Oh well, you got me in a
Great.
good mood tonight. But anyway, no, yeah. I mean, I when I was a kid, I had a. I'm old enough to have been around when they landed on the moon, and I was 14, and
Mhm.
and I I had a command center. I stayed home from school. I wanted to be the first. I was Canadian. I grew up in Canada. I wanted to be the first Canadian astronaut. But I was just fascinated. I would have loved. I'd still like to walk on the moon. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Who
would
wouldn't?
I? But and so if I were given the opportunity, I might consider it. But on the other hand, it's I can watch. I really feel like I'm on the Mars when I listen and watch the rovers and see the
Yes.
stuff that come. And so, do I need to do that? No. I mean, would I maybe like my friend, William Shatner? Would I go up in one of those Vomit Comet 6 meter rides? Maybe that, but but it's people don't realize it's very dangerous space exploration. But
Yeah.
I look romantically. I'd love to go to them. I'd love to walk on the
Sure.
moon. Yeah, I do it. If someone offered me, if Elon Musk offered me that opportunity, although I don't think he's going to be doing it, he'll go around the moon.
Yeah.
I'd consider it. It's the idea of walking the moon is something that I found romantic. Mars, no way,
Yeah.
no
No,
way.
that's
Why would I want to go to Mars for
there's.
a
I feel
2 year
so bad.
trip? You die
Yeah.
on the way. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel so bad for those people who are going to be signing up for that first Mars mission to basically just wind up, disappearing.
Yeah, I mean, are killing each other on the trip. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, it ain't gonna look. It's not, and I know Elon, but
Mhm.
I think the people who think that we're going to Mars in my lifetime or maybe even yours, I think it's. I mean,
Yeah.
that what not we, but that ordinary groups of people are going to be going to Mars
Right.
and colonizing it. That's just nonsense.
Right. I
It's
agree.
just so expensive and dangerous. Yes, I expect we'll send astronauts who will land on Mars sometime, maybe in the next 40 years.
Right.
That'll happen. But colonizing Mars, come on.
I also always want to be like, have you guys ever read the Martian Chronicles when you were in school? Like,
Yeah.
like nobody remembers that book.
Yeah, and Matt Damon. How many people want to eat potatoes all the time? I mean, it's really
made out of your own shit.
although that's where I
Yeah.
live, there's a lot of potatoes. But even and that's a lovely book, by the way. It doesn't matter, but it's realistic in many ways, except it's totally unrealistic. You wouldn't be living on the surface
Right.
of Mars for 3 years because you'd be dead from radiation.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know it's a weird thing that people like. I have friends that truly 100% believe that they're on board, that they're ready, that it's going to happen. It's like, I don't know, you're not going to make it, but whatever.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it's true. Well, there were all these people who wanted to. One of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes.
Ooh,
remember to
love
serve
that.
humanity? You'd probably
Yes.
before your time. Okay, yeah.
Oh my God, that's so great. I love the Twilight
Yeah.
Zone. I was just talking about that with somebody else the other day too. That's a great show. So I've got 2 more questions left for you. We ask every guest this. The hour's flown by the way. So thank you so much
Sure.
for entertaining us and me.
I tried to entertain. But
Yeah,
you put me in that kind of mood anyway.
Oh man, it's great. So 2 questions. One is if you can go back in time and give your younger self, a piece of advice that would help you today, what would it be? I know.
I know. I don't like to give advice.
Oh,
I would say
to you.
Buy Apple early. No, let's see. Which I did actually, but the other one, I guess, the more serious one would be don't let the bastards get you down.
Nice, love that.
Okay.
And the other one is what had to end in your life to get you where you are today? It could be good or bad, and it doesn't have to necessarily be about your career.
World War II.
That's fantastic. Well said, sir. Well said.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, man, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And we'll plug your book and everything else. And I hope you'll come back again. And
sure.
we can. Yeah. Thank you so much, man. It's very nice meeting you.
Okay. Same here. You take care. It was a lot of fun.
Dystopia Tonight.